Oops, sorry about that. Hey, it's Fen Dagger. We are going to make some candles today, and I'm running a bit late, so bear with me. Just getting all my stuff ready. I'm going to walk you through the process of how I make the candles for Fen Dagger. And I'm running with a little bit of a janky setup here, so bear with me. That appears to be better. Let me know if you can hear me. Hopefully that's all right. Hopefully that's all right. Okay, look good to go. So I'm just doing this impromptu, so those of you that are here, you can check it out. If not, you can check it out later. Today we are going to be making the Fen Walker candles for the Fen Walker Fare Thee Well Battle Winds. And on this candle, we're taking a much more simplistic approach. After speaking to Fen Walker about his desires for the type of candle that he wanted, and also regarding the subject matter of the album, we felt going kind of more towards a woodsy, a snowy woodsy type scent was the way to go, and also a just strictly white candle. We're not going to be adding any dyes to this one to convey. So if I have time also, I will get into some other things that I do, possibly glass, which I don't typically sell, but I do make. So we'll see how that goes. I've already pre-done a lot of this stuff because it is rather time consuming. So wicking the 4-ounce tins, typically in larger batches, I do a total of 16 tins at a time. And the reason for that is I do the traditional method of double broiling or double boiling, which basically you've got your just plain old regular boiling pot, and then also my electric stove here. So we're going to go and turn that on, get this thing going. Typically I like to go at about 280. And I'm also showing this to you for anybody that's interested in making candles. It's not terribly hard. However, it can get terribly expensive, especially whenever you start getting the fragrances. Like this is just like my go-to section, and it's overflowing. They're everywhere. I've got bins full of these things, and it can get really, really addicting whenever you're searching for fragrances and then also mixing fragrances. So what I recommend for anybody that's interested in getting into making candles, there are lots of good companies out there. I personally really like Candle Science. Let's see. This is just one of their fragrances, but this is their label. You can find pretty much everything that you need to get started making candles from Candle Science, and they have starter kits, which would basically include almost everything that you need. You will still need to buy some external things such as the stove here, and a couple other items, but the starter kits typically come with like one of these little guys. It's a smaller pitcher. I like to run the larger 3-pound pitchers whenever I'm doing my loads. And the reason that I do this is because I like to go the traditional route. I do have a larger melting pot that I very, very seldom use just because I like to do the small runs. They feel a little bit more personal to me. And I can also have better control over everything that's going on with the wax. So that's that. Anyhow, I did leave one open container here. I'm going to kind of just show you how I do this, and I'm going to try and do it one-handed. So this is our typical just tea light wick. They're perfect for the 4 ounces. Now if I were doing like 16 ounce or glass or anything like that, I would bump up my wicks, and there's a whole host of wick stuff out there that you can research, and it gets very, very in depth. So that's a whole nother ball game I won't get into. Anyhow, wicking these, let me take off these gloves real quick. All right, so this bottom of the wick, we're going to take our little sticky tab, which typically come with the wicks, and we're just going to stick that on the bottom, and it's a double-sided sticky tab, so we'll just peel off the tab, and then basically just a pin, a deconstructed pin. We're going to take the wick and insert through the pin, and we're going to hold it kind of tightly right at the tip there. Then we're going to go to our container and basically put it right there in the middle and press down so that it's nice and firm. On these, I use wick setters to keep basically the wick from falling over whenever it's in the hot wax. So put that on there. And then I'll put it in the line. The next thing that we want to do is prepare our wax. And this is why I have the gloves on, because wax can be messy at times, and it's starting to get warm here where I live, and so the wax tends to be a little softer depending on the wax. The wax that I use for the lamp and dagger candles is a hybrid wax. It is soy, paraffin, and vegetable wax, so it's a combination. The purpose for the combination is to get a smoother pour. There's a lot of waxes out there that can be a little bit more difficult than others. Paraffin can be difficult when it's 100% paraffin. Soy can be difficult when it's 100% soy. The hybrid mixes tend to make things a little bit easier. So I will bring you over here in a sec. Okay, we've got our wax container and then our scale, which we're going to measure out, set to pounds, and then our little slicer here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to slice this up into cubes. And like I said, it's getting pretty warm, so this is really easy to slice. If it were winter, it'd be a little more difficult. And oh, I forgot something. I'm going to put the picture up here, and we want to tear it. Okay. So we're just going to go into the picture. We want to get, I typically do 3 pound for the lamp and dagger runs. So we're going to try to get this as close as we can to 3 pounds. Might need to slice it a little bit smaller. And by the way, I don't know if you can hear it, but we are listening to the new Shrouded Gate, which is going to be coming out this Friday digitally. I've actually already started on the candles for the new Shrouded Gate, which they smell amazing. He went for a kind of more plant-based forest, but tropical type forest, much like what is conveyed in the artwork that Brendan Elliott did, which is amazing artwork. Brendan Elliott, who's done lots and lots and lots of fantastic artwork. Pretty soon my wall is going to be filled with his stuff, and that's okay. I love it. Getting close. About 7 more ounces to go. Sometimes I gotta push the stuff down, which this stuff, like I said, it's a little softer so I can get away with it. If it were paraffin or tart wax or freestanding candles, it'd be a whole nother story. I would be breaking this stuff on the ground because that stuff is incredibly hard to break up. This just makes life a little bit easier. Still burns great, still holds a great fragrance, so I really like it a lot. Alright, we're almost there. I have my screens are behind me, so if you have any questions, comments, feel free to ask. I will turn around here periodically and see if anybody's curious about anything. It's just okay. I like to do just a little over 3 pounds to give myself just a little extra, just in case. Wax is a funny thing. It will absorb different fragrances and different dyes at different capacities. So I always like to leave myself a little bit of wiggle room whenever I'm dealing with the wax. Okay, we've got our pitcher full of wax. We're going to take it over to the boiler. Just set it 280, and we're just going to set that in there and let that melt. Typically, if this were like I said, like paraffin or a harder wax, we'd be here for a long time. But this wax typically doesn't take a terribly long time. So we're going to set that in there and leave that alone. I'm going to put you back down here for a sec. Yeah, I'm gonna clean up my mess right quick. Okay. Also, in the interest of saving time, I have already pre-mixed the fragrance for the Fen Walker candle, which is here, doing about 3 ounces. So essentially about an ounce of fragrance per pound. Like I said, Fen Walker was looking for a kind of more forest and snowy forest type smell, which is essentially what this smells like. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of pre-made fragrances out there from lots and lots of different companies. Like I said, Candle Science, fantastic. Another big one that I use, Aztec, also Virginia Candle Supply, all very good, top quality products. Also, the dyes, which we won't be using on this one, but are very useful. Got a lot of these that come from either Candle Supply, Virginia Candle Supply Company, and there's a host of other ones out there. Those are just the ones that I really like. Some of the other things that I should mention, if you are interested in getting into doing this, like I say, a starter kit is definitely the way to go. That's basically how I got started. I got myself a starter kit and then went from there, and then slowly accumulated a lot of this stuff. But the stove being pretty important. Also, heat gun, absolute must. You got to have one of these if you're working with wax, because typically the transfer of wax needs to be done when it's hot. If you have dealt with candles when they're lukewarm or even beginning to cool, it can get extremely messy. Just a lot easier to navigate and control whenever the wax is hot. All right, let's check on our wax. We're melting, moving at a good pace here. This thing will start boiling here, which is typically what you're going to see when you're running something at 280 degrees. While we're doing that, I'm also going to prep a different type of wax for these two guys here. Now, these two guys here, like I said, I don't typically sell glass, and there's a number of reasons that I don't. Number one, shipping's a nightmare when you're dealing with glass, and it can just be a pain. Also, more expensive to do. Glass containers cost more than your regular tins. Even the 16-ounce tins that I sell on the site are less money than running glass. Granted, glass does look very nice whenever you've got a good color. You can also do some pretty neat stuff with the wax in the glass, which I've done in the past. Anyhow, these I'm just running as testers. These little 1 ounce bottles here, these are all my testers. These are all items that I pick up to get new ideas for scents and mixing fragrances and so on and so forth. And during the springtime, I like to play with a lot of scents that are apple based. Got a lot lighter notes to them versus what I do during autumn and winter, which are a lot more heavy bass, much more robust than a lot of the spring scents. I'm not a big fan of like the floral scents that come out during the spring, so I typically gravitate towards something that's like off of a fruit tree or something like that. Anyhow, the other wax that we are going to now be cutting up, this is another hybrid. However, it's a much more solid hybrid. It is strictly paraffin and soy, and I think the paraffin percentage is more than the soy. So let's go ahead and check this out. Appreciate you guys being here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or if you just want to chat away. So it looks like the Shrouded Gate, the Shadow Clone, and also the Fen Walker Fairly Well Battle Winds cassettes will be arriving at the same time and will most likely be released at the same time. So that is good news. I'm going to do the same thing for the glass containers. However, since we're only doing a sample, I'm only doing 1 pound, which is much easier to set up and control. Other things that are on the horizon for Lamp and Dagger, we'll be releasing the new Guild of Lore Wandering Tales 2, but I believe it's going to be a cassette which collects everything from Wandering Tales 1 as well as 2. So it looks like it'll be both of the albums on one cassette. Also, the Year Quest, there's a plan to do a very small run of that album for those that liked the JRPG chiptune stuff. Just measuring out to 1 pound here. Okay. We're just going to take this and set it to the side for now. We'll deal with that in a little bit. Another thing that goes into this is the label making, which the labels for both the Fen Walker and the Shrouded Gate candles are done. Also, the Somber Arcane candles, which are actually done, and we are eagerly awaiting getting that release out to you. I know that Somber Arcane has been working tirelessly on an immense package that we will be releasing. Cassettes, look fantastic. Candles look and smell fantastic. I won't give away too much because it is an epic release. I cannot state that enough. It is an epic release. All right, let's check our wax over here. You can see we are now just starting to bubble up a little bit here in the water. The reason that we do a double boiler is basically because if you were to put the wax straight into the pot and just boil it, for one, it would not be easy to extract, but two, it would burn the wax. So you do a double boiler to preserve the integrity of the wax, keeping it below 200 degrees. Way that I track that, this little handy guy, basically just stick this in here, chuck it on the wax. We're at 165 in the wax pitcher, and the water we're currently at 178. So we want to bring that up a little bit. I bumped it up to 300 here just to get things rolling a little bit quicker, but I'm going to drop that back down so that I don't risk burning the wax. If you burn the wax over 200 degrees, it doesn't necessarily render the wax useless. It basically will just give it a discoloration, which I've accidentally done it before and it wasn't that big of a deal. But if you are adding color and some types of fragrances even will alter the final curation of the candle, which typically a curation for candles is generally about 2 or 3 weeks. Some will argue with me and say it's got to sit for a month. Some will say it's good in 3 days. There's lots and lots and lots of opinions out there as far as candle curation. Typically, with this type of wax that I'm using for these candles can be cured in as little as a week. So about 7 days, but I like to let them sit for at least 14 if I can possibly manage it. And generally I can. The other thing with the candles is storage always must be somewhere dark and cool. You definitely don't want these candles curing in direct sunlight or even in indirect sunlight. It's not a good thing. Heat plays a big part in the curation of candles. So I typically have closet spaces that I've cleared out that I use, and then with shelving and something like these grids, I like to put them on so that the heat can expand from the bottom as well. Helps them to cure just a little bit quicker. And I think for the 2 jars, we're going to do, an apple and maple bourbon, which is kind of it's got a little bit of an autumnal smell to it. Reminds me a little bit of some of the autumn scents that I've used in the past, but still kind of vibrant enough that it could be a spring scent. Plus it just smells really good. Like a lot of these things, you smell them and they smell delicious. So we'll put this over here. We probably will add a little bit of dye to that one, perhaps. Burgundy. I'm going to prep this real quick. Okay. It looks like we're getting very close to pour time. Getting there. Another thing that I like to have is a timer. Once this wax has melted, we're going to check the temperature, and we want to add the fragrance at a specified temperature, and we want to pour the wax into the containers at a specified temperature. So the way that I've been doing this, and I've learned to be the most efficient way, is to get this wax completely melted and at around 180 to 185. I just want to have a little bit of wiggle room once I take it out of the boiler and let it sit and cool down, and then that way I can have just a little bit of time if I need to prep my fragrance, or if I need to prep my dyes or anything else I might need to do. I can let this sit while I'm doing those things. Again, I've already prepped the fragrance, so we're good to go there, and we're not using the dye here today. Typically, once the pitcher is out, wax is melted, and we reach approximately 175 is where I like to be whenever I add. Looks like we're good to go. All right, so we're at 181 currently. I'm going to remove the pitcher, and we're going to set it here on a little hot plate. And I'm going to drop the temperature of the boiling pot down to 180. The reason that I'm going to do that and leave it on for the time being between the pitcher is because once I add this fragrance, which is at room temperature, it's going to drop the temperature of the wax. We want to remain at a specific temperature when we're mixing the fragrance into the wax. And typically, when mixing the fragrance into the wax, you want to do it between 2, 3, 5 to 6 minutes. I typically try to at least get 3 minutes to 4 minutes stirring of the fragrance into the wax. I'm going to check this again. We're at 182. Another thing that you want to have, you always want to have some airflow going in your workspace, wherever it may be. My shop is pretty well vented area, but with everything that's in the air as far as the fragrances go, and some of them are very pungent and can be a little bit overwhelming. And once you hit it into the wax and start pouring, well, then you've got 16 containers emitting that fragrance. So you always want to have some airflow going. I've watched other people that do candle making, and like in apartments with very poor ventilation, and they always complain of headaches and so on and so forth, and it's just not good. You want to have a very well ventilated space. Okay, where are we at here? Dropping down to 179. I'll give this just another minute, and then we'll get back into the fragrance. And we are going to add this afterwards. 2 hours every day. You got to do it. No matter how busy you are, if you want to keep on going, you got to do it. All right, we're at about 178 here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab simple, just a long stirring spoon. There's lots of different things you can use for the integration of fragrance and wax and mixing them. And I've seen lots and lots of crazy different ways that people mix their wax. I just like to use a regular stirring spoon and then just stir it in. There are some people that I've watched that use spatulas. I don't like using anything with any kind of plastic on it because you are putting this into really, really hot wax. It's just not a good idea. So something metal typically is a little bit better. All right, we're at 176. We're going to go in with the fragrance. So I'm going to take my fragrance and I am going to go in. And I am going to start my timer. And then we're going to stir it in. And again, since we are not doing any dyes on this one, I won't be adding dyes to this. Now, the reason again that I left this on is we want to check our temperature right away to see where we're at after the fragrance went in. So now we're at 168, which I don't want to be under 170. So we're going to go back in to the boiler at 180. And we're just going to keep it nice and warm right around 170. You can go up even to like 175 as long as you're not going all the way back up to, 180. You don't want to overheat the wax while the fragrance is in there. The reported best temperature to add your fragrance is between 170 and 180, so that's why I shoot for 175. And we just stir this in there. You will see some air bubbles in the wax. Typically that's not a big deal. It is a big deal if you're running like just paraffin or even soy. Air bubbles can be a big hindrance for when you're pouring the wax. The air bubbles will basically situate themselves within the wax in the container, and then over the course of cooling, the wax will collapse on itself, which is, if you've ever seen a poorly poured candle, it'll have defects such as, pits, and even on the sides like of jars, you'll see some air gaps. That's how that's created. And typically that's only remedied by like a heat gun or slow pouring. Most of the time, if you're pouring really slow, you can avoid those kind of defects. However, with this wax, it's a lot more forgiving, being that it's a hybrid wax. It tends to pour a lot more smoothly. We're going to check our temperature real quick. All right, we're back up to 175, so I want to pull it back out and just give it enough time to drop down. While I'm doing that, now I'm going to add my paraffin soy mixture, 1 pound for the glass containers. And I'm going to continue stirring here. This is Dungeon Scent Candle Making 101. at about 3.5 minutes almost. Gonna stir a little longer. It's a very, very nice fragrance. Kind of got a depends on when you smell it. Like when you smell it straight out of the pitcher while the wax is still hot, it tends to be a lot more robust with certain notes than others, as opposed to once this is in a container and cured, then you get a little bit more of a balance with the scents. All right, we're approaching 5 minutes here. I'm gonna check temperature. We're at 170. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute, and I like to have some paper towels already pre-laid out. Obviously for a couple reasons, because you do have spills such as this mess. It happens. It's wax, and it does what it wants sometimes. So typically in a pouring phase, you want to move slowly and pour evenly. On the 4-ounce tins, it can be a little tougher because it's a smaller vessel. On a larger vessel, you can get away with going a little quicker because you got a little bit more room. But on these, you see that lip right there? That's typically what I'm aiming for whenever I'm pouring. So we're gonna get to that here in a second. All right, we're just about there. Wipe my spoon off. All right, now I am going to try to do this one-handed, which is not something that I have done before, so you might see me make a mess. We're at 165, so we're good to pour. That is basically the perfect pouring temperature. I've got these angled, ready to go. First one's going to be a little sketchy, so here we go. Hit the line, done. Move on to the next one. Again, I'm doing this one-handed, which I typically don't do, so it's a little bouncy. I'm trying to go as slow as I can. Got a little too much in that one. And then we'll move down the line. It's a little harder to see down here. Almost there. set that down for a second and top these off. Came up a little bit short on the last one, but that's no big deal. I can always add to it later. As soon as you're done pouring and everything is in its container, first thing you want to do is clean your pitcher. You do not want to have to clean your pitcher once that wax has cooled and solidified in it. It will be a nightmare. Unless you have a heat gun, which then you can just melt the wax back down. Have to make sure they're nice and clean so that the next round of wax that goes in it isn't mixed up with a different fragrance. We're good. Now, we'll move on to the glass containers and let these sit and cool. Reset my clock here. Also, I can't overstate this enough, but cleaning as you go, it's a huge, huge time saver. If you leave a mess, you're going to be sorry, and you're going to be cleaning up a lot of really messy wax later. I'll bump this up. Okay. We have our first batch of the new Fen Walker candles poured. I believe that Fen Walker has aptly named these Totem Woods. I believe that's the name that we're going to be sticking with on this one. And we'll move right on to this batch as soon as it's melted. Give me 1 second. Speaking of Shrouded Gate, what luck today. The cassettes showed up. So these will be coming out very, very soon. Give you a better look. I have a sky blue cassette. Which will be coming with our usual setup, poster and candle and a sticker, of course. So very cool. These just showed up. Okay. We're getting close over here. I'm going to go ahead and get that ready, and I'm also going to get my dye ready. I know burgundy's a little heavy, but it's maples and bourbon. And again, I'm just doing this one as a tester. I usually keep these around for myself or friends, family, just to get ideas for future candles. I am, however, going to want to make some room for myself, so I'm just going to back these up just a little bit. These are very hot. And then we'll put these guys over here. On the glass containers that I'm doing right now, I've got a different type of wick setter on these. You can use the metal ones like on the 4 ounce. I typically don't like to, just so I can go a little bit higher. If you notice, these have a tendency to drop down into the container. That's for a couple reasons. One, to just keep the wick secure where it's at, but also it acts as kind of like a guiding point with how high you want to go with your wax. Typically, I like to go with the ring on the inner container. It's a lot easier to see. But these are also nice. However, they don't hold the wick terribly tightly, so you can kind of see there's a little bit of a bend in the wick there, which isn't that big of a deal. The candle will still burn normally, and it is still straight up and down. So that's basically what you're looking for when you're doing this kind of candle pouring. And we're almost there with our 1 pound of paraffin and soy. We are currently listening to Shrouded Gate's other project, Artemore, which this is on the Northeast Dungeon Siege Twitch channel, which aired, last week, the 17th. We did a listening party with Shrouded Gate and Artemore and Ancient Metal, all hosted by the gracious Northeast Dungeon Siege, which Northeast Dungeon Siege has a new skirmish coming up this Friday as well. So you've got the Shrouded Gate digital release, and you've also got a dungeon skirmish with Garadrak, who I'm very excited to see. And then I believe it is Mosswitch, if I remember right. Let me see here. I'm sorry, Mesquite and Frost Guard. I don't know why I was thinking of Moss Witch. All right. We're just about there. You can see I got just a little bit down here. It needs to be melted. So let that sit for just a little bit longer. And we want to get the spoon back out. Part of the reason doing this video, just to kind of give you an idea of what goes into making the packages for the Lamp and Dagger releases. This is, again, this is only 16.4 ounces. Typically I will make anywhere from 70 to 100 depending on the quantity of the release that we're doing. So for instance, for the upcoming Somber Arcane release, I've done 100. And for past Guild of Lore releases, typically I've done 100. For this Fen Walker, I think I'm doing just under 100, and it'll be about the same amount for the Shrouded Gate as well. So it can be very time consuming. And again, I do have a much more convenient wax smelter, which holds a lot more wax. I just, again, I like doing it like this. I like being able to do the small runs. It just, I don't know why. All right. We are looking good here. Let's see what our temperature's at. We're at 186, so we're good to go. We want to let that cool down for a second. We're going to drop our temp back down to 180 on the hot plate. And we're going to get our additional fragrances and color dye put in. Now there are color dyes in liquid form, but you also have color dyes in wax form. So there's benefits to using both. There's benefits to the dyes, and there's also benefits to using the wax form dyes. I've just found that mixing the dye goes a little bit more smoothly whenever you're using the wax dye. You obviously have to melt it in with the wax, which is not that big of a deal, but it is a little bit harder to judge the consistency of the color, because no matter what color you put into this dye or to this wax, whenever it's hot like this, it's going to be its true color. However, once it settles into the wax and begins to cure, it is not going to remain that same color. So something that is a super dark burgundy can come out much lighter, which is essentially what I'm kind of going for with this. I'm not trying to go too terribly dark, but I do want to get something of a contrast with the burgundy. mixed into the wax. It's always kind of a learning process, and it makes it kind of fun figuring out what dyes react differently, and also what wax dyes and how much wax dye it takes to get to a specific color. So far, for the majority of the colors that I've used, I've been very happy with the results. I've only had a few that came out that were just, I didn't like them. But it's all based on preference. We're at 180 and drop it down just a little bit. We want that to get down to around 175. If you're in a big hurry, which typically in candle making you shouldn't be, candle making takes time. Even though once you've got the process down, you can streamline it pretty well. And you know, I've literally busted through 3 sessions of doing, you know, 16 containers at a time, back to back, which is not a big deal once you've got the process down. But you know, if you're just getting into it, I highly recommend just trying either jars. They have mason jars and other types of containers out there which are really easy to pour into, and you know, are good beginner containers. The tins are not bad either for beginning. They just don't really include them in a lot of kits. They typically always include jars. Why that is, I don't know. All right, we are at 176. We're going to go in. So I am going to prepare my fragrance. Fragrance going in. It's just 1 ounce going into 1 pound. I'm going to start my timer. And I'm also going to add just a tad dye. These things are a pain. Sometimes they stick. One more. There we go. Okay. You stir that up a little bit. You can see how dark it is. Check my temperature. The less wax that's in there, the colder it's going to get. So right now we're 163. We want to warm that back up and just continue to stir. Check our temp. About 3 minutes there. Since it's 1 pound, it's not going to take as long as the previous batch. Check our temp. We're at 170. It's good. I'm going to turn my heat off on the water and just continue to stir this for just a little bit. And then we'll pour them and see how they look. Got a wick that moved here. Those kind of things will happen, especially once you pour. You can just reset them. This particular wax, a little less forgiving, but again, these are just testers that I make, so I'm not trying to win any awards here. 165, good to go. Wipe my spoon off. Okay, let's pour these in to the glass containers. These you do want to go a little slower if you can. Right about there. Put a little bit more in this one. When you get down to the bottom of the pitcher, you'll see that it starts to dry. So, in an effort to conserve the wax, what I'll do is I'm going to take my heat gun. We're just going to melt all that back down. Got that nice and hot. You can pour the excess, if it'll come out, if there is any. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. Just depends on how the fragrance bonds to the wax. And we're good. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you enjoyed watching some candles being made. And a little bonus with the Shrouded Gate cassette showing up today. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to ask. And if you're not following our page, Lamp and Dagger on Facebook and Instagram, I try to do more of these whenever I can, just to kind of give you an inside look at everything that we do. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Again, the Fen Walker candles starting to dry. Takes a little bit longer when it's warmer, and it is a little warmer today. And then the glass, which those will not remain that color. They will definitely change and lighten up, but they definitely look cool like that. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks so much for hanging out.